welcome to the Monday evening.
Love ball like I do. After Dark, it's a must listen.
It's where I go to get my hoops fixed.
This is Field of 68 After Dark.
All right, welcome in. It is the Field of 68 After Dark on a Sunday. Chris Childers, Mike LaTulip, and Rob Dauster alongside. It has been a busy weekend of basketball. Yesterday was crazy. We had some upsets. We had that awesome game, the environment off the charts in Tuscaloosa with number 1 and number 2, with Auburn flexing and solidifying themselves, I would assume, as the overall number 1 seed with a couple weeks left to go before Selection Sunday. But exciting weekend today, no exception. We had a bunch of games, guys. We'll get into all of them today, but Rob, things are heating up, my friend, and we saw it in the Big East. How about the statement? John Fanta on the call today as St. John's in front of a packed Garden gets a massive win. Now they got a 2-game lead in the Big East.
It's unbelievable the job that Rick Pitino has done there, and I'm all the way in on Big East basketball, right? I grew up on Big East basketball. I've watched Big East basketball more than anything else for basically my entire adult life. And I don't know if I can remember seeing the Garden the way that it's been the last month anytime St. John's has a home game there. The way that city has kind of embraced that program and that team and the run that they're on and how they play and the style of basketball that they play, and the fact that they have Rick Pitino, who is one of their own, coaching the program. It's such a fun marriage of coaching pedigree, of the program, of a fan base, and of a building. I've said this over and over, guys, and we can talk about the specifics of the game in a second, but I've said over and over that the best place to watch a non-conference basketball game, a big non-conference basketball game, is Madison Square Garden. When you have the two fan bases in there, when you have, it was the best in like 2014 when you would have half UConn and half Syracuse in a Big East tournament semifinal game. Or, the nights when you get Duke fans up there playing whoever. I'm sure it's going to be awesome when Duke plays Illinois on Saturday night up there. It's been like that for St. John's games, except it's all red. And I don't know that I've ever seen the Garden all red. And it's turned into an actual home court environment, Madison Square Garden, for the Johnnies. It's such a good thing and a fun thing for college basketball. And to see them go on this run, it sucks that it's not UConn winning, but if it's not going to be UConn, let's let it be Rick Pitino, man. He's a great story. He's a great coach. And LaTulip, this has been, I don't know how you guys feel about it. It's been a lot of fun to see the St. John's basketball program come back into relevance in this way.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth, because it's not lost on me at all to see, or just realize kind of how cool it is to see Rick Pitino leading a program like this, like St. John's, and selling out NBA arenas that, for a college team, like, that's not the easiest thing to do. We've seen plenty of college teams that play in NBA arenas that can't create a true college atmosphere, but that felt like it today. And it's felt like that for the last few months with St. John's. So, he's one of the last guys left of the old guard. And just to see the way I think some of the coaches from that old guard have fizzled out, and the way their teams played and how they kind of lost their teams, Rick Pitino hasn't done that. Like, these dudes play for him. And he's still, you can see him in the huddles. You can see him during timeouts. He's still bringing it the same way he did 25, 30 years ago. And there's just the energy hasn't stopped with him, and it translates onto the court. We'll get into the game, but I agree with you, Rob, man. It's been really cool to see that.
There's definitely I didn't mean to cut you off, Childers, but there's
No.
definitely a joke to be made here about how Rick Pitino was embracing the NIL era because he was embracing the NIL era before NIL was a thing.
Well, and that's kind of where I wanted to go because I agree. Like to me, Rick Pitino, obviously there was all the stuff with Adidas and all that, but he's not exactly like this warm, fuzzy, savory kind of, buttoned up guy, but he's a guy with that New York grit, right? He's got that accent. He's got that look to him. He's got those, the white suits from time to time. He's kind of got that whole mafia, kind of vibe to him. And he fits so beautifully in Madison Square Garden at that school, at that small private school. And for me, like he's made the Northeast, him and Dan Hurley have made the Northeast sexy again. Like that's what I grew up with that in Syracuse, Georgetown, and all these programs. I'm a DePaul fan, and that was a school that played the Marquettes and all that. Like the small Catholic schools used to have that place in the world. And to me, to kind of have New York City and to have UConn and to have kind of that vibe going on in the Big East, like you said, it's pretty damn sexy. But, Pitino's a guy to me. We've seen Tony Bennett leave the game. We've seen, in the past couple of weeks, Leonard Hamilton left because of an NIL disaster. We saw Jim Larinaga leave. We've seen Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jay Wright. Go through the list of guys. And yet you have a guy that everybody kind of looked at like and said, little sleazy in some respects, but might really translate well. It's the same thing I say about, and he's a friend of mine, but it's the same thing, Rob, I say about Bruce Pearl. Because, like, Bruce, to me, the era, the way it changed, like, Bruce can play ball with the best of them now.
Yeah, and that's kind of what that's where Pitino has really embraced this, where he's leaning into it. And I think it might have helped that, he spent those 3 years in Greece and he spent some time at Iona. So it's not like he's been dealing with it at the highest level like some of these other guys have. And I think there's part of him is like, I'm going to prove to everybody that doubted me when I left, to prove everyone that had questions about me or said things about me. I'm going to prove every single one of them wrong. I also think there's a part of him that is just, he doesn't know how to function when he's not coaching a basketball program, right? How many people think about how much money he had in the bank when he lost his job at Louisville, and what did he decide to do? Oh, I'm going to go coach Panathinaikos, right, out in Greece. And now living in Athens is nice, but it's still, you're going to Greece where you don't speak the language, and you're going to go try to coach professional basketball teams. The thing I love about it is what he does as a coach. It has not changed in like the analytics era with pace and space and all this. I got a stat for you guys. I sent this to our social team earlier. I'm curious if you guys can get this answer correct. Since UConn won the national title in 2011 as a team that shot 32.9% from three, there have only been two teams in college basketball that have been shooting 33.1% or lower and reached the Final Four. Can you guys name those two teams since 2012 that have been able to do it? Off the top of your head.
South Carolina.
Nope. South Carolina was a 33.4% three-point shooting team. It was Louisville in 2012, shooting 31.8%. And it was Louisville in 2013, shooting 33.1%. And who was the coach of both of those Louisville programs at the time, Mike? Rick Pitino. So here's what I'm going to tee you up with this. Let's do a little. The Johnnies shoot 29.3% from three. I actually went through on KenPom today, and I did the math out. There have been 12 teams in total since 1997 that shot 29.3% or lower from three and got an at-large bid to the tournament, let alone won a game or made it to the Final Four. Got an at-large bid to the dance. That's what the Johnnies are shooting this season. Does this team, the way that they play, the style that they play, the force turnovers, get offensive rebounds. We're not going to shoot a lot of threes, but we're going to kill you with mid-range jumpers from Kadari Richmond and RJ Lewis. Does that translate into being able to make a run in the NCAA tournament in the year of our Lord 2025?
I think it does. I mean, to this point, I again, we look at analytics and you see, teams wanting to force mid-range jumpers, and St. John's continues to shoot them and continues to make them. And they've done this time and time again throughout the year, but there's something that goes beyond statistics with this St. John's team. Like, we can look and try to crunch numbers and do analytics, but it's what makes really good coaches, and it's what makes playing hard and playing your ass off. It's what allows you to overcome some of those certain things, and that's what St. John's does. Because we saw it today in this game. Creighton tried early; they wanted to get early offense badly. Mm-hmm. And they were able to do it because they got stops. They were able to get out, and you want to do anything you can to not play the half-court defense of St. John's. And so that's what they did. Because the thing with when you're playing against St. John's, there's a lot of coaches that sit there and say, well, you know what? You got to pass up the good shot for a great shot. You may not get a great shot. You probably won't get a great shot against St. John's. You might not get a good shot against St. John's. So you need to take these shots early and often, like Creighton was doing earlier in that game. The issue was once St. John started putting the ball in the basket and could set up their press, it was tough. And then on top of that, like we look at these teams that don't shoot it well, but they guard really well. Those teams don't typically play with a really frenetic offensive pace. And obviously it's a Rick Pitino coach team, and St. John's does that. And they played with that same type of pace today. They turned the ball over 5 times. So you're thinking, hey, we at least get chances for runouts when they turn it over. 4 of those turnovers were dead ball turnovers. So they're setting up their press anyways. So it's amazing to see it. And like the last point I'll mention with St. John's, because it's been something I've been wanting to touch on all season with them. Stephen Ashworth was 94 for 97 from the free throw line today, coming into this game today, and he misses 2. And there's no surprise it happened in this game today, because there is a mental toll that is taken on you when you play against St. John's. And the best way I can describe that is everything that is usually second nature for you against 95% of other teams, inbounds, dribbling the ball up the floor, entry passes to start your offense, all those things that you usually can do mindless, you don't do mindless against St. John's. So there's a mental toll that is taken throughout the game. So you see when St. John's gets back into games, like look at the Xavier game early in the year, they mounted comebacks. They had another one today where they kind of took the reins in this game. It's because of that.
UConn and Gamble, they were down by 14.
They did it to UConn and Gamble as well. And so that's what you're up against when you face this team, in addition to the physicality that you got to deal with. That's just you're straddling
legs those
2 different things. How many shots were short for Creighton in that second half?
How many shots was Ashworth wide open and he missed? Like he must have had 4 threes in the second half. Like Childers, there were like 4 of them in the second half where he's wide open, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, "That's money. Oh, that's good. That's Ashworth. He's wide open. You can't give him that look." And they're just off. And it's not like even just short. Like he's off to the left, he's off to the right. Like you could just tell that battle had kind of worn on him a little bit.
And he tried to do everything he could. He ended up, I think, 7 of 17 from the field. So he tried everything. He put up a lot of shots. He tried to will him to win, but at the end of the day, St. John's was just way too much at home. Mike mentioned it. They only had 5 turnovers in this game. There was 2 stats that really stood out to me, because it's not like St. John's shot the ball particularly well, but they're, like you guys said, they're tough, they're feisty, they're fierce. But they turned it over only 5 times, and they got to the free throw line. They didn't shoot it well from the free throw line, but they got to the free throw line, I think, twice as many times as Creighton did. So when you look at the final score, 79-73, you're looking for 6 points. You find them there, right? That's where they got it done. But 2-game lead right now, and I think it's pretty amazing what the excitement that is building around this basketball program. And to me, it pisses me off, because it should have been this way all the time. St. John's could always have been this. Like, why did you waste it for all these years? All right, let's go to another game today that was pretty damn awesome. Michigan and Ohio State, great rivalry game. Dusty May and company have been fantastic the entire year. A lot of people say he could be coach of the year in the Big Ten. He can be coach of the year, period, in college basketball. He's done a fabulous job since coming over from Florida Atlantic. He's replacing a guy that was, a legend of the program and a native son, and certainly kind of a, weird, controversial way to end the tenure there. And now you have a guy stepping in there, Dusty May, that did exactly what he was charged with. At Florida Atlantic, brought him to the Final Four. At Michigan, make us great. He's doing that. They're playing a rival. They find a way to get it done. Ohio State had a chance at the end, could not get the shot to fall. 86-83 is the final score. And Mike, I mean, you look at Michigan, and I know Ohio State was right there, but the 7-footers, Golden and Wolf, they're a problem. And you look at their stat lines tonight, both those guys just ate it up inside.
Yeah, they did. And look, that is something that when you look at the rest of Big Ten play, this quest that they're on for a Big Ten title, and then heading into March, there's just something to be said about having an advantage every single game. And for the most part, against most teams in the country, Michigan is going to have an advantage in the front court. And you saw that on display today. And you talked about Dusty May. I mean, Dusty May just continues to strengthen his case for Big Ten Coach of the Year. And I love the fact, along with him, we heard it from Bruce Pearl this week, like there's these coaches that aren't shying away from what this means to them and kind of, talking their shit a little bit. I like that. Dusty was in the locker room after the game today, and he's like, hey, all that stuff, Ohio State fans, they want to talk to us. Like, what pisses them off the most is when you just brush that off your shoulders. And then, he got the locker room riled up, and then they, started talking about Michigan State, which is, another rivalry game for them coming up. But look, in this game, I mean, I saw the stat today. Michigan has now won 9 conference games by 4 points or less. And that's the most by 4 points or less since, I think, Wright State in 2007, 2008. So it's been a long time, and a lot of games have been played. But I don't think it's fluky at all, because there's a role identification to this team. There's a clear pecking order of who has the ball and who's going to operate late clock. And then on top of that, I talked about Dusty May. I mean, you got a guy that, as far as out of timeout, X's and O's, draw something up, get us a bucket, he's as good as anybody in college basketball. And the thing that I loved about today was Danny Wolf had it going. It's 76-73. Ohio State scrambles. They say, man, we got to throw a 1-3-1 at him. We got to stop him. But he's 7 foot. Now you got a rebound out of the zone. He gets an offensive rebound, put back, scores, goes down, blocks a shot on Bruce Thornton. And then when they come back down to basically seal the game in a way, he draws up 2 plays, neither for Danny Wolf. It's not for Vlad Golden. It's for Roddy Gale. And that is not a coincidence, given the history with Roddy Gale in Ohio State. And it's Iverson cut over the top into kind of a wrap into a layup. Then you had a stagger away, dribble, keep, and do a layup. I mean, that is, and to get a guy like that going who struggled. I mean, Roddy Gale struggled during the game. And so, like, when I look at Michigan and you look at them, like I said, for March, it's not just a bet on the front court. It's not just a bet on the role identification. It's a bet on a damn good coach, too, in Dusty May.
Yeah, I literally have that. I have that written down. I don't mean to cut you off. I literally have written down right here, Dusty ran shit for Roddy in crunch time. That's literally what I have written in my notes. And the thing that makes them so dangerous. Yeah. The thing that makes them so dangerous to me, and the reason why, they're not a metrics, darling, because, we're going to talk about Maryland in a little bit. Maryland's beating the brakes off of teams. And I don't know how many wins that they actually have where you look at that and say, okay, that one moves the needle, right? Whereas Michigan has a lot of wins where you kind of say, that's a pretty good win, but they're all kind of these games where they're winning close, they're winning in crunch time. I don't want to say it's lucky, but it's they've kind of turned around what happened at the start of the year where they melted down against Arkansas, they melted down against Oklahoma, and they blew a double-digit lead in each of their first 3 losses of the season, right? They lost at Minnesota in the game they should have won. So having the ability to go to your 2 7-footers and put them into a ball screen if you need to, or run offense for Roddy Gale and know that you're going to be able to win games if you need to, or know that you have guys like Namari Burnett or Trey Donaldson that'll step up and knock down a big shot. Like, that just makes them so dangerous and so much more difficult to guard, because you already have this thing that you're not used to dealing with a 7-footer that can handle ball screens like a point guard, but you also have all these other guys that you have to have in the back of your mind. It's not like you can just say, all right, we're going to figure out how to deal with this ball screen and we'll move on for there. It's like they don't run the ball screen. And then you got this guy, Roddy Gale, who averaged 13 and 4 last year at Ohio State, and he's coming in and he's making shots even though he's struggling. So it's a really, really good, well-balanced, well-coached team that, I'll be honest, Childers, I was one of the doubters. I said, you're getting Danny Wolf and Vlad Gold. You're going to play them together? What are you doing? Are you drunk? Did Dusty have too many Mai Tais in Boca Raton before he left for Ann Arbor? Like, I didn't think it was going to work. And it did. He made me look dumb. Big Ten Coach of the Year right there.
It's working beautifully. It really is. And to me, what he did today by setting it up for Roddy Gale, that's like, I think that's a message to your fan base that I'm all in. Like, I'm one of you. I'm ready to shove it up their ass. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to stick it to Ohio State. I'm going to stick it to the rival. I mean, somebody who covers football, trust me. I mean, these sons of, they hate each other. They hate each other. I mean, they are as obnoxious and crazy and as ferocious and as just insane as any fans in America. And we just saw, trust me on this. We had a football program where Michigan beat Ohio State. Ohio State went to win a national championship. This is the biggest game they've had since in any sport. And it mattered. And I think Dusty May, I'm telling you, Dusty May today, all the great things you've said about him are true. But I'm telling you, in every bar in Ann Arbor right now, they are toasting that guy. Because Roddy Gale, that is a middle finger Rob Dauster right at Ohio State. And there's nothing that endears anybody to the Michigan fan base more than when you stick a couple middle fingers up at the Buckeyes. That's what that was. I mean, it's not.
You're right. You're not wrong.
It's the best, too.
I agree.
I love it. The rivalry's insane, Mike. It's so good.
It is. And Rob, to your point, too, like, let's talking about Danny Wolf for a second. I mean, I don't get pissed, but I get annoyed when I hear the talk of, like, when someone's describing a player saying, hey, he's a 6'10", 6'11", 7-footer, and they use the phrase that can handle it. This guy can handle it. And that's just code for, the guy can dribble more than 2 or 3 times and it's not a total disaster. Danny Wolf is more than that. Danny Wolf, when you go past the point of just being able to handle it, his processing, and I know he'll have some turnovers from time to time. Those will happen, but his ability to process and read defense and read the weak side. And I think the pieces all make sense too, because Donaldson can shoot it, Burnett can shoot it. And then Vlad Golden, I think Vlad Golden should be Tyler Hansborough's favorite player. Not just because he wears 50, but that dude is he's Psycho V. And so I just, the way
Vlad
he
the Impaler. That's what we got to go with. Vlad the Impaler, baby.
That works too. But the way he slips out of screens probably better than anybody in college basketball. And then, his presence around the basket, it all fits together beyond just the talent of these individual guys. So that's what I love about this Michigan team.
They're
I agree. 100%.
Pretty damn special. They out-rebounded Ohio State tonight, 46-31. Beat them in the paint, 46-34 as far as points scored. And for Ohio State, a missed opportunity to get a quad one win. Also today in the Big Ten, we'll talk after the break about a great win for Maryland. They flexed against Iowa. They looked really good at home. They are hot, Kevin Willard's team. We'll talk about it after the break. Chris Childers, Mike LaTulip, and Rob Dauster on the Field of 68 after dark on a Sunday.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM for the season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using the bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets. Go download the BetMGM app and use the code FIELD today. College basketball fans, are you ready to take your hoops game to a new level? Whether you're a seasoned bettor or just trying to win your March Madness office pool, Rhythm is here to give you the edge this season. With data-driven predictions for every single college basketball game left on the schedule, Rhythm helps you maximize your bets. And as March Madness kicks off, Rhythm's insights will help you spot those plucky Cinderellas that you know are going to shake up the NCAA tournament. But that's not all. When Selection Sunday rolls around, let Rhythm's AI-powered bracket generator do the heavy lifting for you. This is the same AI tool that performed 35% better than the average ESPN bracket last year. And here's the best part. Rhythm pairs perfectly with our Field of 68 expert analysis, giving you the 1-2 punch that you need for the rest of the college basketball season. So don't wait. Download Rhythm today and get ready to see college basketball and your betting results in a whole new light.
All right, we're back here, Field of 68 after dark on a Sunday. Chris Childers with Mike LaTulip and Rob Dauster. Some big games on this Sunday. We're still a couple of weeks away from the conference tournaments and inching closer to Selection Sunday. It's becoming real by the day. It's becoming more and more like something that's like it's in the immediate future, which is so damn exciting. You kind of feel it when you go to these games. Like the Garden today, you could tell that March was right. It was right around the corner. Let's talk about more of these games in Maryland today. College Park, they blitzkrieged Iowa. They looked really damn good the entire game for 40 minutes. If you look at the performance, Jacob Gillespie was on fire, led the team 11 of 14 from the field, 26 points, 4 threes. Derek Queen, 18 points, 13 rebounds. Maryland, they flexed. I mean, it was like Arnold Schwarzenegger on stage in 1978, all oiled up. I mean, it was a flex and then some. Mike LaTulip, what did you think of Kevin Willard and the Terrapins' performance today?
I think it's incredible what Kevin Willard's done from 1 year to the next. You compare last year to this year. If this was last year and Iowa hung 51 points on Maryland in the first half, Maryland would be down by 25. And we even saw that in the Big Ten tournament last year against Wisconsin, the last game of Maryland for the season. Give up 47 in the first half, down by 21. It's just the difference for them this year is they can still guard at a high level, but they can gun with you. And then when they tap into that defense, they can blow you out. And so, like last year's team, 10 games that they lost, they held their opponent under 70. 10 games that they lost, they held their opponent under 70. This year, Maryland has scored under 70 twice, and they scored 70 at the 13:30 mark of this game against Iowa today. So I continue to be impressed with this team because coming into the season, you know, Jameer Young's gone, and there were a lot of question marks. I mean, Rodney Rice hadn't played much college basketball at all. He played 8 games 2 years ago at Virginia Tech. And he's been 13 a game this year, playing like a potential like third team All Big Ten type of guy. Jacoby Gillespie, people questioned his size coming from Belmont. He's a smaller dude, but he's got burst. People questioned the fit with Derek Queen next to Julian Reese. That's worked out better than I think anybody could have imagined. And then Selton Miguel was a 21% three-point shooter in his 2 years at Kansas State at the high major level. And he's shooting 43% from three this year. So, like, I mean, I got asked this last week, just who would be a dark horse Final Four pick for me would be Maryland. And I get it. They're thin. They got, you know, most of their production comes from their starting lineup. I get that. But what am I missing with the shooting, the size, the defense, the you know, explosiveness offensively, the combustibility offensively? And then I'm looking today, and I'll look into the camera to say this. Maryland students, get out to the game.
Yeah.
Get out to the game. Like, you have a damn good team, and that back wall of bleachers that goes what looks like to heaven when you go there.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous
That
when they
thing,
get going.
I think that thing was maybe 60% full today. That thing needs to be 100 for this team, because we know in college basketball from 1 year to the next, you could have a great team 1 year and then things fall off the next year. Embrace this one, because I think Maryland's for real, man.
Yeah, I think they are too, and I think both them and Wisconsin. And I said this last night. I think that those are the two teams more than anything else have really flown under the radar. And for Maryland, for me, it's because if you look at who they've actually beaten, right? I think they have 2 loud wins, 2 wins that really kind of make you turn your head and notice. One of them was at Illinois when they won. Sorry, Mike, when they won by 20. And that one could kind of get explained away by there's some injuries, there were illnesses. Like, it was a weird time. Like, it was a little bit of a little time of upheaval for Illinois. So everyone looked at it and said, yeah, that probably says more about Illinois than it does about Maryland. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Maryland was just like 3-4 in the Big Ten 3 days before they played that game. And then the other one was beating Wisconsin at home. And Wisconsin is a team where like they too are flying under the radar. So it's not like Maryland has done anything that would grab our attention and make us lead the field of 68 after dark with it that night that they play, right? And that's probably still the case. We're not getting to this game until the second block, but you still get Michigan at home, or Michigan State at home. You get a chance to go to Michigan, and you get a chance to put yourself in a position to be like, if you're a 4 or 5 seed for this Maryland team, I don't want to play you as a 1 seed in the Sweet 16.
Absolutely.
I think that you're built to be able to have a chance to make a run. There's a little bit of, it's not the same as Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, but there's a little bit of like that too big, surround them with a bunch of shooters. You're going to have to make some decisions on who you want to guard. They got different ways to beat you. And I will say this about Wisconsin, one last point, and Mike, you can have 30 seconds to respond to this and tell me if I'm crazy or not. If you look at all of the champions since 1997, right? They've all, with the exception of 2014 UConn, been top 21 in adjusted offensive efficiency entering the tournament. And outside of 3 teams have all been top 31 in adjusted defensive efficiency entering the tournament on KenPom. The 3 teams that won the title and that were outside the top 31 in defensive efficiency, 2021 Baylor, who had a weird thing with they were a top 5 defense in America. That was kind of fluky. 2015 Duke, and 2009 North Carolina. All 3 of those teams were good defenses with absolutely elite offenses. And Wisconsin is not that far away from that. They're like a top 5 offense and a top 4. They're not that far away from that kind of profile. And they got a guy that can go win you games on any given night. And I think you got to give a lot of credit, not just to Kevin Willard for how he adjusted this Maryland program, but to Greg Gard for how he's gotten Wisconsin from being like, they're going to be 360th in pace and be the most boring team in basketball to like, they kind of get out and run a little bit and they spread the floor and they try to isolate you. There's a lot of one-on-one and space you out and let guys cook it. Wisconsin, Maryland, these are fun teams to watch. They deserve more credit from us.
Shouldn't Maryland like be this moving forward as long as we live in this era of NIL and collective? Now that we've seen evidence, like Derek Queen's a freshman, he's a stud. It's paying off. You know, we're seeing the transfer from Belmont, Gillespie, who was outstanding. Like now every alumni, you know, the guy from Under Armour or whatever, they can look at this and say, okay, we got the coach. We got the thing. Now let's pour more money into it. Like they're in the DMV. We know the kind of talent they have in and around the area. I mean, should this not be Maryland's reality moving forward, Rob? Should they not be this kind of program?
They should be. A large part of that is mending some fences with some of the power brokers within the programs in that DMV area. I think isn't it like the last kid from DeMatha that went to Maryland was Travis Garrison in like 2002 or something like that. There's some stat like that. Maybe he transferred in. Maybe it was Jameer Young that transferred in. Rodney Rice. Yeah, that's the one. But he's like the first one in like 20 years that has been there. So that will help them be able to get some of that talent from that area. Because for people that don't know, the high school basketball leagues in and around the DC area, in Maryland, in Northern Virginia, Archbishop Carroll, Archbishop O'Connell, all of those, DeMatha, all of those programs, Gonzaga Prep, that's the best basketball conference in the country, right? There's more talent coming out of the DMV than just about anywhere else in the United States of America. And being able to keep that talent at home is the priority for Kevin Willard. And when you put together a staff, that's one of the things that you could see him prioritizing there.
Like, it's certainly impressive what he's been able to do. And I think Maryland certainly is in a good spot. Memphis, they took one on the chin today. They lose in overtime. They lose to Wichita State. The Shockers have now won 4 games in a row. Memphis had an 8-game win streak snapped. Quincy Ballard, 14 of his 19 points for the Shockers in the second half. So they needed it. They're on a little run as we get closer to the conference tournament. For Wichita, a great W. But Rob, for the Memphis Tigers, they won 8 in a row. Stuff like this happens. Is this a moment of concern, or do you just chalk it up as one of those games that you lose in overtime?
I mean, look, The problem with where Memphis is right now as a basketball program is that when you are playing in the AAC, every loss that you take is going to get looked at as if it's a bad loss. How could Memphis go on the road and lose to Wichita State? Well, Wichita State is coached by a guy named Paul Mills, who, if you remember, took Oral Roberts to the Elite Eight a couple of years ago, right?
Oh, yeah.
He's a very, very good coach that's coming from the Scott Drew coaching tree. They got high major players on that roster, Bijan Cortez, Ronnie DeGray specifically. And Coke Arena is one of the better home courts that you'll find. Now, it's a lot better when Wichita State is like top 25-ish, top 30-ish, top 35-ish kind of good instead of being middle of the pack in the AAC. But it's still a place that's a tough building to play in when they are just okay, especially when Big Bag Memphis is coming to town. And when you are in the American, you are everybody's Super Bowl. You are the biggest game that everyone's going to play. You're going to go on the road. It's going to be packed in gyms that are normally 40% full. And you're going to take everybody's best shot, and you are going to lose some of those games in league play. It is just going to happen. And when you are a part of the AAC instead of, the revamped Pac-12 or the Big 12 or whatever else Memphis could have tried to get into, it's just going to look bad, and you're going to get dinged, and it's going to hurt you more on your resume than it would if you are a program like St. John's that goes on the road and loses to Villanova, right? No one's really questioning the St. John's loss at Villanova. Everybody's questioning the Memphis loss at Wichita State. And the difference there is not as big as we probably are making it seem when it comes to how the public is perceiving those two losses. So you lose, and everyone's going to lose on the road in league play. It's just going to look worse for Memphis because of the conference that they're in and the situation that they're in right now. So it is what it is.
LaTulip, any concern for you today, or do you think for Penny it's just not a bad loss, middle of February, a couple weeks left, maybe a learning experience for the guys?
I mean, I think there is some concern because, this is obviously a disappointing loss, but when you're playing in the American and you're Memphis, this conference season was going to be much more of a mental battle than it was physical. Mm-hmm. I think, can you continue to challenge yourself internally when the reward of these games is not as high as would be if you won a Big 12 game or if you won, an SEC game, or, you're not going to get all the quad one opportunities you're going to get in some of these other leagues. So like the thing with Memphis is they have an ability to win games with, their C+ basketball. Like C+ games probably can win them games in the American. And so what you have to try to fight is, hey, we don't want to plateau as a team and stunt our development by just, playing down to our competition night in and night out. And there's certain things,
habits, and develop bad habits.
I mean, Wichita State was revved up to play this game. And just like everyone's going to be when they play Memphis. And so the things that I think could eventually kill Memphis in March are the things that tend to continue to persist. And it's on the defensive glass. It's turning the ball over. They only had 10 turnovers today, but the flurry of turnovers that they have, when you go up 53-45 and on the backs of your incredible shot making that you have from behind the arc, your next 3 minutes can't be 3 turnovers to allow Wichita State to get back in the game. Like the killer instinct has to come in to say, okay, we're on the road. We're in a tough environment. We give ourselves this cushion. That's not to exhale. That's to shut the door. And so they let Wichita State back in this game, and credit Wichita State for fighting and staying in it. But like the shot making is real, right? They shoot it really well from 3. And you could see today that kept them in the game. It extended the lead at one point. They hit those 3 straight threes in about 45 seconds, it felt like, to get up 53-45. So, there's, when you look at the turnovers and when you look at, and again, it wasn't as bad today, but some of the rebounding stuff, Corey Washington had 6 offensive rebounds in the first 15 minutes of that game. That just can't happen with some of the size they have in that front court. And then defensively, the reason why you get hurt on the glass is because you try to go to this matchup zone. Haggerty's kind of a roamer, trying to get steals, trying to play passing lanes, making kind of futile attempts at the ball. And it puts strain. Wichita State had 5 lobs in that second half because the weak side defense is just, they're scattered. Everyone's scattered. Nobody's in position. So there's certain things that are concerning to me. Not just in American play, but when you get to the NCAA tournament. So they got the talent and they got the shot making, and can they bottle that up for, 3-4 games in the NCAA tournament? We'll see. But that seed line is going to slide if you step on a few of these landmines in the American to finish the season.
Shockers have now won 4 games in a row. 5 of their players today in double-digit scoring. Let's go to the ACC. Louisville. Pat Kelsey is the modern savior of Cardinal basketball. They were woeful last year when you look at where the program was under Kenny Payne. He steps in, and it's like a modern college basketball miracle. Today they beat Notre Dame by 15 on the road. He gets his 20th win of the season. They're 20-6 overall, 13-2. They're going to the tournament. They shot 49% from the field. They outshot the Fighting Irish 49-36. They hit 11 threes along the way. This is pretty remarkable. All 5 starters in double digits. They've got balance. They rebound the ball. This is a hell of a team. When you look at the turnaround, it could not be going better, Rob Dauster, for Louisville and Pat Kelsey. And I know those fans have been struggling and they were frustrated. This is very pleasing for them.
Well, the only thing I'll disagree with is that I think it could be going better. Like you could have Case and Pryor healthy. You could have some of the Corin Johnson. Could have a shoulder that's healthy.
Fair enough.
But I think what Kelsey's done now is he's kind of found. Normally, he's one of these guys that wants to play 9, 10, 11, 12. Like he wants that competition in practice. He wants you going balls to the wall for 22, 23 minutes. You get 4 minutes here, you get 5 minutes here, and he wants you playing as hard as you can for those minutes when you're on the floor. And it's just like, it's almost like a war of attrition, right? He wears you down and wears you down and wears you down because as soon as you go sit, he's got another guy coming in that's just as good and going to be playing just as hard. And oh, by the way, he's going to be fresh, and it's going to allow him to stay fresh for longer into the season. I think what we're seeing now with Louisville is he's kind of found the 5 that he wants to roll with, right? And the 5 that he trusts, the lineup that works together the best. It's Chucky Hepburn, Rain Smith, Javon Hadley, Fats Edwards, and James Scott. And these guys are guarding. They are difficult to defend. The ball zips around. They kind of really figured out where they are supposed to be. They've been together since the summer. They played out in the Bahamas. They know where each other are going to be, and it's working, man. And a part of me is, look, I'm all in on this team, right? I think they really do have a ceiling. I just want to see what happens when they get outside of the ACC, and a lot of that is, they've kind of been able to get right playing against some of this competition that is not necessarily what we've come to expect out of the ACC on a consistent basis. But I'm buying the shot making. I'm buying the coaching staff. I'm buying the way that they're able to fit together. I'm buying what they look like offensively when they're humming. And I'm buying the fact that they have length and athleticism and shot makers at pretty much every position on the floor. I really, really like this Louisville team, but that's not a surprise, LaTulip. Everyone knows. I've been on Louisville since day one.
You have been. And look, Fanta and I interviewed Pat Kelsey a couple weeks ago, and we can talk about the strength of the ACC. I mean, it's that may end up being probably will end up being a 3-bid league, but I can't just look at 13-2 and be like, like that's so impressive for a team that you hear across college basketball. There's plenty of coaches that are talking about, well, we have injuries and we're missing this guy, and they've missed so many players at different points of the season, and they continue to win. Not only do they continue to win, there's games where they're beating the brakes off the teams. And when we interviewed Pat Kelsey, Fanta and I, the thing that he said is that he tells those guys, it's always the next thing. What's the next thing? And you could hear that and be like, well, of course, that's coach speak. But when you instill that mentality in your team, then they don't get too high. They don't get too low. They focus on the task at hand. I mean, you got to think, for what Louisville basketball's experienced over the past few years, these dudes are probably getting treated like royalty right now. 13-2, it was bad last year. It was bad the year before. I mean, these guys are saviors and probably have all the people tweeting at them and probably sending fan mail. People are telling you how good you are in the arena, and they've just continued to stay level-headed throughout it all. And I think that starts at the top with Pat Kelsey. So again, just like I talked about Dusty May earlier, like we can dig into metrics and we can look at the conference and the strength of schedule and all that stuff. But I continue to lean towards teams that have the coaching and the leadership that a team like Louisville has with Pat Kelsey at the helm. So they go in, again, like you could have a letdown on a Sunday night in South Bend, but you don't. You win by double digits. And again, Rob, you talked about it, finding lineups that make sense and rolling with it and having guys bought into that. It's just, I'm so impressed by them. And Kelsey's just continued to make me a believer because he's won everywhere he's been. And there's no surprise that he's turned Louisville around this quickly.
He's the right guy for Louisville at the absolute right time. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk about a big game in the Mountain West at the Pit today. Two teams that could be dangerous come March. We'll get into that, plus get into some Sunday superlatives coming up. Chris Childers, Rob Dauster, Mike LaTulip on the Field of 68 After Dark.
There is no sport in America that is more difficult to follow than college basketball. It can be overwhelming. That's where the Field of 68 Daily comes into play. The Daily is your go-to source for injury updates, recruiting news, and transfer portal additions that actually matter. For just $50 a year, get access to the same information that your favorite team's coaching staff is subscribed for. Quality content can be hard to find in the college basketball space. The Daily is here to help you with that. Would you be surprised to find out that the Field of 68 is home to more than 35 podcasts? More than 25 team-specific podcasts that are hosted by the people that know what fans want the most. The Goodman and Humble podcast, the DTF podcast, the A10 Insider podcast, and the Mountain West podcast. But wait, there's even more. The Field of 68 will be launching the ACC Insider podcast this year. Subscribe to this channel and come along for the ride.
All right, we are back here, Field of 68 After Dark. Chris Childers with Mike LaTulip and Mr. Rob Dauster. One more game we want to break down before we get to our Sunday superlatives in the Mountain West. Fun game, good atmosphere. New Mexico gets a huge win over Utah State. They're now 14-1 in the Mountain West, 82-79. If you're a fan of Utah State, probably a little bit pissed off because if you look at the free throw difference, the Aggies were 13 of 16 from the field, 81%. Listen to this. New Mexico, 27 of 34 for 79%. Certainly some eyebrows raised, but great game, great atmosphere. Mike, what'd you think about the win tonight for New Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of East Coasters and hoops fans that miss a lot of Mountain West basketball. And you had, if you're a basketball fan, you had no excuse today. I mean, I think this is one of the best games of the weekend. And both teams dealt with foul trouble, obviously, throughout the game. But at one point there was, 17 of 19 shots missed. But when you're watching it, you don't really care because these dudes compete at such a high level. And I've always said, like, when I know that you care, I care. And that's what you see, I think, a lot of times with Mountain West basketball and specifically with these two programs. So, that Utah State jumped on New Mexico in the second half and got up to that 46-36 lead. And then True Washington just flipped that game. And, not only did it hit a few buckets, but picking up full court, getting into guys, forcing turnovers, getting the Pit into it. He was just a catalyst, in addition to Donovan Dent, obviously, but he was incredible today. And you've seen with this New Mexico team, when True Washington is aggressive offensively, they win games. I mean, this is now they're 16-0 now when he scores in double figures. So just an awesome game. Falslev was incredible as well. It's just high level basketball, and I think I look at these two teams, and these are two NCAA tournament teams in my opinion. And if you're a high major team that's playing against either of these two teams to open up the NCAA tournament, if you don't bring it, you will get your ass kicked. Period.
Yeah, and I would say that New Mexico is not just a tournament team. New Mexico's they can win a game, maybe two, and make a little bit of noise. Like right now, we have both Utah State and New Mexico projected to end up somewhere in like an 8-9 game. If I'm them, I'm hoping like maybe I do enough to drop down to that 10 seed, so you don't have to end up with like an Auburn or a Florida or a Duke in the second round. But both of those teams are dangerous enough to be able to pick someone like that. Donovan Dent is the best point guard in college basketball nobody's talking about. Like, he's having an All-American caliber season, and it's crickets because he plays in the Mountain West and on the West Coast. I said before, part of the reason that it's hard to get people to watch these games in the afternoon is because it's supposed to be Mountain West after dark, right? Like, we're supposed to be half drunk on a Friday night, turning it on at 11:45 and watching the end of some insanity. Someone from Nevada hitting a 75-footer to force overtime in the pit, right? Like, that's what the Mountain West is supposed to be. We're not supposed to have great basketball between two top 25-ish kind of teams on a Sunday afternoon on big CBS. That's my one qualm. I understand why you're doing it, Mountain West. But come on, man. Like, the insanity is what makes you so special. The fact that, like, we watch a game and it feels like the guys out there are as drunk as we are is what makes it so awesome. But the pit is a place where you have to go if you are a college basketball. Like, that is a bucket list venue for you to go to. And when you have a situation like first place on the line, a Mountain West championship on the line, with a program like Utah State coming in, it's going to get loud, it's going to get rowdy, it's going to get fun, and that's exactly what we got today. The biggest thing, just to kind of put a bow on it, last year the problem that New Mexico had was they were like 6 foot, 6'1" across their backcourt. This year they got True Washington, who's 6'4" and tough. Amsel can play on the wing. They brought in CJ Nolan. They got more size across their perimeter, which has made them a much more dangerous team when it comes to matching up against some of those teams from the power conferences.
All right, so great win for New Mexico at the pit today. Let's get into some Sunday superlatives here on the field of 68 after dark, and let's start with our best win of the weekend. It was a busy weekend. Certainly the headline game was yesterday in Tuscaloosa. Auburn gets a big win. That was a big one, but for me, the biggest win of the weekend was today, was St. John's getting a 2-game lead inside the Big East. They had a scratch fight call, showed a lot of toughness. The Garden was packed. New York's got energy. To me, college basketball is better when that's happening. So I think St. John's had the biggest win of the weekend, extending that lead to 2 in the Big East. Rob Dauster, your biggest win of the weekend was who?
Well, I'm just going to say that Auburn winning is too obvious, so I'm not going to go with Auburn. I'm going to say Houston going into Tucson and knocking off Arizona, doing the same thing St. John's did, taking a 2-game lead in the Big 12 regular season standings. Milos Uzan is the one guy that nobody's talking enough about and what he's done over the course of the last month. He is a game changer for the Cougs.
Mike LaTulip, best win of the weekend was what?
The Wisconsin Badgers. And the reason for it was you
didn't want to go with the other Big Ten team on the road that won on Saturday?
No. It was Wisconsin. CBS revealed their bracket, and Wisconsin was on the 3 line. And I think people at the time had it was a head scratcher for some people. And then you couple that with, like, it was set up for Wisconsin, who had won 5 games all time in Mackey Arena, to have that, get shown on that seed line and then come out and, potentially get run out of the gym like they have a few times in Mackey. But instead, they put on one of the best offensive performances we've seen in the last 15 years and one of the toughest environments in college basketball. So I think while the focus is on Michigan and Michigan State with this game coming up and who's going to win the Big Ten title, Wisconsin's creeping up on them. And they have the easiest schedule remaining of all the teams that are contending for that league. So that's why this win was so big, in addition to, I think, just kind of solidifying some things about, their resume and where it's at right now and where they can potentially be for seeding come March.
All right, let's quickly go worst loss of the weekend. I'm going to go with the Drake Bulldogs. They lose today. Their star, Benon Sturtz, was not really effective. Didn't do much. He was 3 of 8 from the field, only finished with 8 points. Tough loss for them. We know in leagues like that, losses are unforgiving when it comes to the committee and the resume and the SOS and the RPI. So I'll go with Drake with the most disappointing loss. Rob, how about you?
I'm abstaining from answering the question. It was UConn, man. It was UConn. You can't go to Seton Hall and lose. You can't blow a 7-point lead in the last minute of regulation. You can't blow a 5-point lead in the last minute of overtime. You can't lose to the worst Power 5 team in college basketball and expect anything, especially when on Tuesday night you go in there, you say 2 rings boldly and it goes viral, and you go and you lose to Seton Hall. What are we doing, man? I quit.
It was UConn. It was UConn for me as well, but I'll throw Kansas in there, just because they're continuing to search. The offense continues to be a chore for them, and they really have to be elite defensively to, I think, beat really good teams in March. So another tough one for them. They just don't have the physical advantage that I think previous Kansas teams had. So I think that's made life a little bit difficult for them this year. So just a tough one. They've lost 3 out of 5, and they're heading in the wrong direction here. As we approach March. So UConn was my pick, but I'll go with Kansas.
All right. One more quick superlative, and I'll let you guys take it. Mike LaTulip, who was the bubble team that helped themselves the most this weekend?
I think it's got to be Texas. I mean, I understand. Like, you can look and say, hey, Kentucky was undermanned and they had people out, which that's been noted at this point. But when you look at it, like the committee is still going to see a win against Kentucky at that point. And so you obviously could not lose that game with how undermanned Kentucky was as well. So, Mark and Johnson, I thought were incredible. And this is one that Texas needed to try to stay on the right side of that bubble.
All right, let's get to our toast. Go ahead, Rob.
I just went with Wake. Wake won at SMU. SMU is another bubble team, so I would go with Wake Forest. Sorry.
No.
Forbid ACC.
Forbid. All right, let's get to our toast of the night here, guys. I will toast here quickly. It's an obvious one, but Bruce Pearl, heck of a show. Winning in Tuscaloosa is a big deal. So Auburn, toast to you, Bruce Pearl. Rob, how about you?
I'm going to go with Nebraska. You're down by 20 points at Northwestern. You find a way to be able to come back and win. Nebraska is probably closer to being in the bubble conversation than I think people realize, and that win at Northwestern looks better than on paper than it probably does in real life.
Take us home, Mike.
I'm going to go with New Mexico. I know we talked about them a little bit, but for them to continue to do what they've done in Mountain West play and stay atop the standings and compete for that regular season title. I love the way they play. They're well coached. They play hard. Toast of the night's going to New Mexico Lobos.
A well-deserved toast at the pit. We are done for the evening. Thank our producer Gagan, for Rob and Mike and Chris Childers. See you next time on After Dark. Have a good week, everybody.